To express Chazara Shiur, being that Mishnah Dal and Sugya has a little bit of a longer share, we're going to present a express Chazara Shiur, which is going to go through just the Havana without just the slideshows. Let's get started. Mishnah Dal goes as follows. The case goes as follows. The Balabayas gives fruits to his friend to watch to the Shomer, and it's going bad. How's it going bad? Says Rashi, either it's rotting or it is getting eaten by mice. So the din is, Tanakama says you shouldn't touch it. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, the Shomer should sell it in Beis Din. Why? Because like returning a lost item to the owner, just like a lost item, it would have gotten lost and destroyed, and you're returning it to the owner. Over here also, you're selling it and giving the money to the owner. And with that, let's go on, very simple Mishnah, let's go on to Sugya Yotes. And before we go on to Sugya Yotes, let's go through some Yediyas Mukdamas, basic Yediyas Mukdamas. Truma Meiser, first of all, Truma is a percentage that we give to the Kohen, and the Kohen needs to eat it while he is Tahir, and Meiser is a 10% that we give to the Levi. Tevel is all the food, all the rest of the food before we designate Truma Meiser. Let's say a farmer brings home 1,000 cases of oranges, so all of it is Tevel until he designates Truma Meiser. Until he designates, and once he does, and until that point, until he designates Truma Meiser, he cannot eat any of these fruits. And with that, we begin Sugya Yotes. Sugya Yotes. Again, let's recap the Mishnah. The Mishnah says if the Baal Bayis gives fruits to his friend to watch, and they are getting rotten, the Tanakama says you shouldn't touch it. For the Gemara, my time, what's the reason? And for the Gemara, two reasons. Number one, Rav Kana says because a person wants his own, what he himself worked hard on, even if it's going to be less, even if it's going to be 1 kav over 9 kav from someone else, if he's going to sell it and get back from someone else. He wants what he worked hard on. He's attached to it. It's precious to him. Second reason, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says because we suspect maybe the Baal Bayis designated these fruits over his own fruits at home. He's designated them as Truma Meiser, so you can't sell it because maybe you're going to sell it to Yisrael, and a Kohen really needs to eat it, so you can't sell it. And with that, we move on to the second part of Chelik 1. So again, Tanakama says you shouldn't touch it. Why? Says Rav Kana because a person wants his own, even what he worked hard on, even if it's going to be just 1 kav. And Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says because we suspect maybe the owner designated as Truma and Meiser. Now the Gemara brings down a Braisa, the Gemara is going to ask a question from this Braisa, and the Braisa sounds very similar to our Mishnah. Hamafkied פירות אצל חברו, one who deposits fruits by his friend. The Braisa, you shouldn't, and they're going bad, you shouldn't touch them. And because the Shomer is not going to touch them, therefore the Balabayas, lefichach, keyword, remember this. Lefichach, therefore the Balabayas is allowed to go ahead and make them Truma Meiser. So now, according to Rav Kana, this works very well. And the flow goes very well. You shouldn't touch them. The Mishnah says you shouldn't touch them. Why? Because a person wants his own produce that he worked hard on. And because you're not going to touch them, therefore, lefichach, therefore, you're allowed to go ahead and make them Truma Meiser. But according to Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, this doesn't really work. Why? Because the Braisa said that because you're not touching them, therefore you're allowed to go ahead and make them Truma Meiser. But Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says just the opposite, that because we suspect that you're going to make them Truma Meiser, therefore you shouldn't touch it. It's just the opposite. Over here you shouldn't touch it, therefore you're allowed to go ahead and make them Truma Meiser. And over here, because you may make them Truma Meiser, therefore you're allowed to go ahead and touch it. Therefore you shouldn't touch it. So which one is it? In other words, which one causes and which one is the effect? According to Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, we suspect maybe the Baal Bayis is going to make them Truma Meiser, therefore don't touch it. According to the Braisa, however, we say don't touch it, therefore you're allowed to go ahead and make them Truma Meiser. So one second, which one is it? And for the Gemara, it's not a problem. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak can go very well according to the Braisa. How? Because he says, this is how you're supposed to learn the Mishnah and then the Braisa. Tanakama says you shouldn't touch it. Why shouldn't you touch it? Because maybe we suspect maybe someone's going to make it Truma Meiser. So Chashinon, we suspect maybe someone's going to make it Truma Meiser. Therefore the Chacham said, don't touch it. Once the Chacham said, don't touch it, now you know what? If the Shomer is not going to sell it anyway, let everyone go ahead and make it Truma Meiser. No problem. And with that, we move on to Chelek number 2. So again, our Mishnah had a machlekes. Tanakama says you shouldn't touch the fruits, and Shimon ben Gamliel says you should sell it in Beis Din. Zog the Gemara, Rabbi Bar Chana, Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Bar Chana says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, this whole machlekes, whether you should touch it or sell it, whether you shouldn't touch it or sell it, is only b'chdei chesron in the regular, if it's going bad at the regular rate. What's the regular rate? Says Rashi that there's another Mishnah later in our parak which we'll discuss it. But one example is wheat and rice. If 4.5 kav go bad per year, per each kur, which is a bigger measurement, a kur is 180 kav. So if 4.5 kav out of 180 kav go bad per year, that's the regular rate. So Rabbi Yechanan says this is all the whole machlekes if it's going bad the regular rate. But if it's more than the regular rate, then everyone admits you should sell it. You shouldn't let it rot more than the regular rate. I'm just going to have a sip of my seltzer. I made a bracha before. Now, if you remember, we had 2 reasons for Tanakama. Number 1, Rav Kana said it's because a person wants his own produce that he worked hard on. And number 2, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, that we suspect maybe the Baal Bayis is designated as Truma Meiser. So now, says the Gemara, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak and Rabbi Yechanan, for sure they argue. Why do they argue? Because Rabbi Yechanan says, more than the regular rate, you should sell it. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, we still suspect maybe the Baal Bayis is designated as Truma Meiser, so you can't sell it. So they for sure argue. How about Rav Kana? Mileva Pligi, do they argue? Should we say that they argue or not? Or could they go hand in hand? And for the Gemara, no, they could actually go hand in hand. They could work very well. Why? Because Rav Kana says a person wants his own calf only if it's going bad at the regular rate. If it's going bad at more than the regular rate, then he could give up on his own, what he worked hard on, and he doesn't mind selling it. Frag the Gemara, 1 second. Rav Kana said, a person wants 1 calf over 9 calf of his friend. That's allotment, meaning that he's ready to lose. He's ready to lose a lot more than Kedei Chesreinon. And that would mean that even Yosem Kedei Chesreinon, you shouldn't touch it. Rabbi Yechanan says, no, Yosem Kedei Chesreinon, everyone holds you should sell it. So that argues with Rabbi Yechanan. And for the Gemara, no. 1 over 9 was just a guzma ba'ama, was just an exaggeration. And with that we move on to Chelek 3. But first, Yedias Mukdamas. One short thing. Truma Meiser market. There's a special market where they sell Truma Meiser. Let's say a kohen gets so much Truma, he has nothing to do with it. He sells it. But it's always going to be cheaper. Why? Because imagine you have a store that has all included. Tameh, Tahar, everything. As you see over here. Okay? Has everything included. So everyone's going to do their shopping in this aisle. Over here you have a aisle of Truma. Who's going to buy it? Kohanim. Only Kohanim are going to buy it. And even Kohanim are not going to buy so much because they can only eat Truma when they're tar. So they're not really going to buy it a lot. So what do we need to do? We need to put it on 50% off, on a much bigger discount, and much cheaper. So Truma Meiser always, if it's going to get sold to a Kohen, it's going to be at a lower discount. It's going to be at a big discount. And now let's move on to Chelek 3. We learned that Rabbi Bar Chana in the name of Rabbi Yechanan said that the machloikas in our Mishnah, whether you shouldn't touch it or you should sell it, is only b'chdei chesron, the regular rate of it getting deteriorated. But if it's more than the regular rate of getting ruined, then everyone holds you should sell it. Our Sugya is going to focus on just Yesem b'chdei chesron. Everyone holds you should sell it. And now we're going to bring down the B'raisa that we learned earlier in Chelek 1. Someone who deposits fruits by his friend, then it's going bad. Lo yigaman, you shouldn't touch it. And because you're not going to touch it, lefichach, therefore, you're allowed to go ahead and sell, and the Baal Bayis is allowed to go ahead and designate them as Truma Meiser. Frag the Gemara, 1 second. Hey, how could the Baal Bayis go ahead and designate them for Truma Meiser? He should suspect maybe it went so bad that more than the regular rate, and the Baal Bayis is going to sell it. And what's the problem? What should we be concerned about? That if the Baal Bayis is relying on it, like we see over here in the B'raisa, to designate it, how could the Shomer sell it if it's Yes Mekdei Chesreinon, as Rabbi Yechanan says over here? Maybe if the Shomer sells it and the Baal Habais is relying on it, then the Baal Habais is going to designate something that doesn't exist, and then Baal Habais ka'achil tvalim, the Baal Habais is eating tevel. And for the Gemara, don't worry, the Baal Habais could rely on it because Yosef Mekdei Chesron really doesn't happen. It's really not common. So no worries, you can rely on that it still exists, that the Shomer didn't sell it because Yosef Mekdei Chesron doesn't really happen ever. For the Gemara, but 1 second, still, even if it doesn't happen, we still have another concern. If it does happen once in a while, right? If the Shomer is going to sell it, then maybe it's Truma. And the Shomer is going to sell Truma to a Zar. That's a terrible problem. That means a non-Kohen is going to eat Truma. That's very, very bad. And for the Gemara, don't worry. Actually, when you sell it, you sell it to Kohenim for the price of Truma. So it's not a problem. There's no problem of a Zar. A Kohen is going to end up eating this Truma. And with that, we move on to Chelek 4. Now, let's go back a second. And Tanakama said in our Mishnah that you shouldn't touch it. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, why? Because we suspect maybe the Baal Habais made it Truma and Meiser. Right? Maybe it designated as Truma and Meiser. And a Zar, a non-Kohen, is going to eat it. Why don't you just give the answer that we just gave? Why don't you just say that you should sell it to Kohenim at the price of Truma? And for the Gemara, that's exactly what they argue about. This is exactly what they argue about. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak and Rabbi Yochanan argue in, if you remember Chelek 2, they argue, right? Vadai Pligi, they argue, right? What do they argue about? Rabbi Yochanan says, if it's Yosef Mekdei Chesron, you should sell it. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says you should not sell it. Why? Because Rabbi Yochanan holds that Yosef Mekdei Chesron is lo shchiach, is not common. And when it does happen, it happens much later on. So what are we concerned about? Maybe, and if the Baal Habais is designated as Truma, then he designated it earlier on. So what are we concerned about? Maybe a Zar is going to eat Truma. So you know what? Sell it to a Kohen. Rabbi Yochanan could use this answer of selling it to a Kohen. But Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, what is he? He says that Yosef Mekdei Chesron happens very often. And when it happens very early. So what are we concerned about? Maybe the Baal Habais is relying on it to designate it as Truma Meiser. And if the Shomer is going to sell it, then maybe the Baal Habais is going to designate Truma Meiser that doesn't exist. And we're concerned maybe the Baal Habais is going to be eating tevel. Therefore, Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, even if it's Yosef Mekdei Chesron, don't touch it. Beautiful. And now we understand a much bigger picture to the machlokes of Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yochanan. And with that, we move on to Chelek 5. And for this, we bring down a brisa. Hamafkid Peretz is a Havere, one who deposits fruits by his friend. When they got rotten, Yayin ve'achmetz, fruit, wine, and they got and it became vinegar. Shemen ve'hivish, oil, and it became bad. Vash ve'hidvish, honey, and it became spoiled. Reb Meir says, don't touch it. Chacham say, sell it in Beis Din. And when you're selling it, don't sell it to yourself. Why? So people shouldn't think that you're buying it at a cheaper price, being dishonest. Kayayitzabai, similar to that. Gabbai tzedakah, someone who's in charge of collecting and redistributing money for tzedakah. When there's no poor people to divide it to. Pertin, you exchange the copper coins for silver coins, since the copper is going to get ruined. La'acherim, you exchange it to other people. Then pertin la'atzma, you don't exchange it to yourself. Similarly, Gabbai tamchoy, I apologize if you can't see this clearly. Gabbai tamchoy, someone who is in charge of the food pantry, he collects food from people in the town and he redistributes the food to poor people that day. When there's no poor people to divide the food to, you sell it to other people. You don't sell it to yourself because people are going to suspect maybe you're being dishonest. But now our Gemara is going to focus on the original part of the Braisa, where if you give fruits to your friend and it's going bad, Reb Meir says, don't touch it. So the Gemara assumes, my love, doesn't this mean if it's going bad more than the regular rate, like wine, honey, oil, right? It's more than the regular rate. And Rabbi Meir says, lo yigaban, that is going to be a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said that if it's Yosef Mekdei Chesron more than the regular rate, everyone holds that you should sell it. But 1 second, hey, that doesn't make sense. Rabbi Meir just said you shouldn't touch it. That means not everyone holds you should sell it. And for the Gemara, no, don't worry. This Mishnah is talking about Kedei Chesron. So Rabbi Meir holds you shouldn't touch it. only when it's kedei chesron. If it's Yosem kedei chesron, then the Taka agrees you should sell it. Frag the Gemara 1 second. Whoa. Wine and it went sour. Oil and it became bad. Honey and it became bad. That's Yosem kedei chesron. And the Meir says, don't touch it. Okay? The Hachmid, V'Yiddish, and V'Yiddish, that's all Yosem kedei chesron. And the Meir says, don't touch it. And for the Gemara, no. This is different because Kevan the Kam. Once it stands in its status of being ruined, honey, oil, and wine. Once it gets ruined, it gets ruined, and it doesn't get any more ruined. So the Meir says, don't touch it. So it comes out that wine, honey, and oil is different. That even when it's Yosem kedei chesron, you shouldn't touch it. But fruits, if it's kedei chesron, if it's the regular rate, then don't touch it. If it's Yosem kedei chesron, and if it's more than the regular rate, then you should sell it. So it comes out that wine, honey, and oil, they're a little bit different. That even when it's Yosem kedei chesron, you shouldn't sell it because you're not gaining anything. It's going to stay the same ruined. You're not gaining anything by selling it, so just don't touch it. And with that, we move on to Chelek 6. And Chelek 6 is going to analyze the Braisa that we just learned. Chachamim say, the words of the Braisa say, Chachamim say you should fix the problem over here. The Shomer should fix the problem, should find a solution, a takana. What's the takana? You should sell them in Beis Din. Frag the Gemara 1 second. If you just said that wine and oil and honey, once it goes bad, why should you sell it? What can you do with it? What can you do with this honey and oil that went bad? And for the Gemara, oil you could use for smearing hides, even when it's even bad oil. And honey, spoiled honey, you can smear it on a sore that's on a camel's back. Because of its load, it gets a sore, and you can smear the honey on the camel's back, and that's what it's good for. And Gemara continues to analyze this Braisa. The Braisa says someone who deposits fruits by his friend and it becomes rotten, or oil or wine that becomes sour, wine that becomes vinegar, oil and honey that become bad, right? All these things, even though where it's Yosem kedei chesron, right? The Chacham say you should find a solution and sell them in front of Beis Din. For the Gemara 1 second. If they're already bad and they're not going any more bad, what are you fixing? What's the takana? What solution are you coming up with? And for the Gemara, you're actually saving the barrels and the jugs that the wine, oil, and honey are in. Because if you just let them sit, then the barrels are going to get ruined. So you're actually, by selling it, you're saving the barrels. Now, the Gemara, frag the Gemara weiter. Rav Meir says that you shouldn't touch it. But if it's Yosem kedei chesron, then you should sell it. So 1 second. If it's Yosem kedei chesron, then everyone agrees that you should sell it. So what really are they arguing in? What really are they arguing about? And for the Gemara, according to Rabbi Meir, he only was concerned about a big loss, like the wine or Yosem kedei chesron. The wine itself, that's a big concern, so we're concerned about that. That's a big loss. But lehafsid muad, for a small loss like the barrels, that we're not concerned about. So once the wine, oil, and honey went bad, just let it sit. We're not concerned about the barrels themselves. But Chachamim say, no, we're even concerned for hafsid muad, for a small loss. Even that, we are concerned about, and therefore you should sell it. And with that, we conclude this long Sugya. L'chaim, today's a special day. America is nicht anders. Tes Adar. L'chaim, bring Mashiach now.